In today's coverage, we are tracking three major developments in the ongoing conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. First, President Donald Trump declared victory over Iran while signaling the war is not yet over. Second, American and Israeli forces have escalated their campaign by targeting Iran's critical energy infrastructure. And third, Iran-backed militias in Iraq are absorbing heavy losses as airstrikes hit multiple bases across the country. These three stories, taken together, paint a picture of a conflict that is simultaneously winding down and dangerously expanding at the same time. Let's get into it. On March 12, 2026, President Donald Trump stood before a rally crowd in Hebron, Kentucky, and said something that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. "Nos vencemos," he told the crowd, using the kind of blunt, triumphant language that has defined his political style for over a decade. He claimed that in the first hour of the conflict, the outcome was already decided. He said American forces had destroyed 58 Iranian naval vessels. He described Iran as a country that the United States had practically destroyed. And yet, in almost the same breath, he made clear that American forces were not going anywhere just yet. Here is what makes that statement so significant. Trump is not declaring the end of the war. He is declaring victory while simultaneously insisting the fighting must continue. "We don't want to go home early, do we?" he told the crowd. "We have to finish the job." And then, in a separate conversation with Axios, he added that there is practically nothing left to strike inside Iran, but that the war could end soon, and only when he decides it should. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States is describing a country he says has been nearly obliterated, while keeping his military engaged and setting no clear timeline for withdrawal. The message to Iran and to the world is that American military power will remain in position until Washington is satisfied, not when the battlefield changes. This matters enormously in the context of what has been happening on the ground since the joint American-Israeli air campaign began on February 28, 2026. Because the second story today makes it very clear that this conflict is not just about military targets. It never was. American and Israeli forces have been systematically bombing Iran's energy and civilian infrastructure. Since the campaign began, Israel has struck at least 4 oil storage facilities in the outskirts of Tehran. Other targets have included a commercial airport and a water treatment facility. These are not military installations. These are the systems that keep a nation of over 85 million people functioning. And experts are now saying openly what governments are reluctant to admit. The goal of these strikes is not economic disruption alone. It is regime collapse. Steve H. Hanke, a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University and a former economic advisor in the Reagan administration, put it directly. The objective, he said, is to weaken Iran to the point of provoking the collapse of the regime or the fragmentation of the state. That is a statement of extraordinary strategic ambition. It means the United States and Israel are not simply trying to degrade Iran's military capacity. They are trying to end the Iranian government as it currently exists. And that kind of objective does not come without a cost. Iran has responded in kind. Iranian forces have struck critical energy installations and civilian infrastructure across the Persian Gulf region, pushing global energy prices higher and forcing Washington's regional allies to confront the real economic consequences of this war. Tehran's strategy, according to analysts, is not to match American and Israeli firepower because that is impossible. Iran cannot win a conventional exchange against the combined military power of the United States and Israel. What Iran can do is make the war expensive. It can raise the cost for every country in the region that has aligned itself with Washington. It can disrupt oil flows. It can threaten shipping lanes. It can keep the pressure high until the political calculus in Washington changes. And here is where the real danger lies. The Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Baker Kalibaf, warned on March 10th that Iran would adopt a direct eye-for-an-eye approach. If Iranian infrastructure continues to be targeted, Tehran will respond in kind. Experts warn that this cycle of infrastructure warfare could intensify dramatically in the weeks ahead, with consequences for global energy markets that would reach far beyond the Middle East. The price of oil does not stay in the Persian Gulf. It travels to every gas station, every heating bill, every supply chain on Earth. Which brings us to the third development of the day, and this one tells us something crucial about how broad this conflict has already become. Across the border in Iraq, Iran's network of proxy militias, collectively known as the Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, are taking serious losses. On Thursday, more than a dozen PMF members were killed in two separate strikes against group bases in the Kirkuk and Anbar provinces. The most recent attack targeted a PMF camp in Qim, in western Iraq near the Syrian border, killing 10 fighters according to reports from the Rudaw Media Network, a Kurdistan-based news outlet. Multiple other PMF bases across Iraq have been hit in recent days. Now, who are the PMF? Understanding them is essential to understanding why this matters. The Popular Mobilization Forces are a coalition of dozens of militia brigades formed in 2014, largely in response to the rise of ISIS. Many of these groups existed before 2014 as independent armed factions with deep ties to Iran. Since approximately 2018, the PMF has been formally integrated into the Iraqi state, meaning its fighters receive salaries from the Iraqi government. But they also operate with significant independence, and their loyalties frequently run more directly to Tehran than to Baghdad. Several of the most powerful factions within the PMF, including Kataib Hezbollah, Asaib al-Haq, and Harakat Hezbollah al-Nujaba, are designated terrorist organizations by the United States. These groups have carried out hundreds of attacks on behalf of Iran since the current conflict escalated. They have targeted American military positions, logistics convoys, and allied infrastructure throughout the region. They are Iran's long arm in Iraq, and they have been essential to Tehran's strategy of raising costs without direct confrontation. So, the airstrikes hitting their bases are not a side note to the main conflict. They are part of a deliberate effort to dismantle Iran's entire regional network, not just its forces inside Iranian borders. The Iraqi government finds itself in an almost impossible position. Baghdad officially expressed condolences to the PMF for their losses, which tells you everything you need to know about how deeply these militias are embedded in the Iraqi political and military establishment. At the same time, both the United States and the Kurdistan regional government are pressing Baghdad to rein in the PMF and stop the attacks. Iraq is being squeezed between its formal alliance with Washington and its practical dependence on and entanglement with Iranian-backed forces that have been part of its security architecture for over a decade. When you step back and look at all three of these stories together, a clearer picture emerges. Trump is declaring victory and signaling intent to stay until the job is completely done. American and Israeli forces are hitting Iran's infrastructure in a campaign that experts say is designed to bring down the regime itself. And across the region, from Iraq to Syria to the Persian Gulf, Iran's proxy network is absorbing strikes, retaliating against energy infrastructure, and driving up global costs. This is a conflict that is simultaneously past its most explosive initial phase and entering a new and potentially more sustained phase of attrition and economic warfare. The question that every analyst is now asking is not whether the United States and Israel have the military advantage. They clearly do. The question is what comes after. If Iran's government collapses, what fills the vacuum? If the PMF loses its leadership and logistics, does Iraq stabilize or fracture further? And if energy infrastructure warfare becomes the dominant strategy for both sides, how long can global markets absorb the pressure before something breaks? Trump says the war will end when he wants it to end. That may be true in a narrow military sense. But the consequences of what has already been set in motion will take years, possibly decades, to fully understand. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the United States has achieved its objectives in Iran? Or is this conflict entering its most dangerous phase yet?